I love what this gentleman does because he focuses on helping other men. And there are therapists, counselors out there, many fantastic ones that work with both men and women. His focus is on men that are dealing with a lot. And that could be struggling with their personal, professional relationships. It could be self sabotage. Maybe there's trauma. Maybe there's anger. A lot of the stuff men don't freely talk about because that's our society. Big boys don't cry. When you're a kid, be a man. Come on. So all that stuff is suppressed and presents itself later in life. He's here to help men move through that and does a great job at doing it. And it's so great to have him here. Rolando Hyman joins us on the program. Welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Steve. It's another beautiful day here in Alberta, Canada, so I'm here and I'm ready to share, Steve.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about. And your practice is called xyspark.org. And this is about men getting their spark back. And maybe that spark was extinguished by certain challenges they've been through, things that they've done. But I feel, and please correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the things that men have done trace back to their past. There's a reason. A man just doesn't make a decision to do whatever it may be. Uh, just like that. Usually there's something connected to the past. Is that true?
Yes, Steve, in a lot of cases, it is because all of us as men, we somehow were cultured to display certain level of masculinity. And so when we experience things from our past, we sometimes become captives to those experiences. And as we grow more experienced and as we get more exposure, the challenge that we have now is how do I not continue to live my life within the confines of that past experience? Because when it is not addressed, what happens to us, Steve, is we constantly live in hypersensitivity day by day.
And could that be from a trauma that we've experienced in the past?
Absolutely, Steve. And trauma comes in so many different forms. Sometimes we experience trauma in our homes. It could be we were raised in a home where our mom and dad there was domestic abuse and we were exposed to that trauma. It could be that we had a caregiver who we brought in who was looking after our boys, and that caregiver exposed the kid to trauma, whether it is sexual or verbal or physical. It could be in the community where the kid was constantly bullied or he was forced to fit in with all the other kids and he experienced trauma from that. So many different things could have happened that brought trauma to become a part of our reality.
And not just men, women do the same exact thing, but I think more men do it in suppressing it. Whatever happened, you got bullied on the playground. That was one part of your life when you were younger, but it still made an impact on you today. Um, and then you just suppress it. It gets buried inside, and you deal with it, or you never deal with it. It just
Yeah,
kind of it's you may not even remember it, but it's there.
yeah, yeah. It's true. And the piece that's so important here, Steve, is as men, we have normalized suppressing negative emotions. All right. And somehow we feel that if, as men, if we display those emotions, then it's a show of vulnerability, it's a show of weakness in our character. So we suppress. But then our actions and our reactions and the way we conduct ourselves in relationships are connected back to those past life experiences.
How, when you work with men do you identify those situations?
That's a very good question, and Steve. And oftentimes, when I'm working with men, this is not a conversation that comes up like on the first or the second, because a lot of men, they first have to feel that this is a safe space. Um, this is a confidential space where I can be human and express that. So when I work with men who I sense that they have had some trauma of some type in the past, my first move is to seek to connect with him, to seek to let him understand that this is a safe space, a confidential space, and then we try to slowly walk with him through the experience, because most men are not going to be willing to jump off at the deep end to talk about it. So it's a really delicate space. You're going to have to be very patient, you have to be very gentle, and you have to become a coach, so to speak, in getting him from where he is to where he'd like to be.
Are there times where nothing comes through when you're talking with them, but it's we've identified that more times than not, it's connected to something?
Absolutely. There are times when, because remember, Steve, the reality is this is, and one of the things that I say to men when I work with men is the programs that I've designed to work with men is for men who are actually ready to take things to the next level, for men who are ready to level up. So if a man connects with me and nothing comes out, it's because he's not ready. Or,
Hmm.
hey, reality is he comes in, and if he realizes that, hey, this is not a good fit, nothing is going to come out. So the perspective behind, are there times when you meet with men and nothing comes out? It will happen if he is not ready to confront it.
It's almost as if you're a an investigator and you find those things. It's not like you're probing and pushing somebody to give it up, but it just organically comes out. But you're looking for signs. This is my view, pieces of the puzzle to help him put those pieces together to figure out the big picture now. What's going on in his life now? Well, it's this piece right here from the puzzle. You're 8 years old. Boom, put that one in there. Here's what, oh, this happened when you were 12. Oh, okay. Well, that one goes there. And that's you today. And that's why all of us, not just men, react certain ways in situations because in my belief, our subconscious is still running that program from back then. We're still acting like kids. In some way, we're still acting like kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And Steve, one piece that I've wrapped my head around as I continue to practice psychology and psychotherapy and connecting with men is understanding that realistically, if, and let me use an analogy here, if I have a toothache, I am not going to go to an optometrist.
Hmm.
I've got to go to someone who is skilled and trained to help me to either do an extraction, do a root canal, or do something to help me to relieve me of the discomfort of that. As a men's life coach, I seek to connect with men and say, let's go to the root of the issue. This is the root of the issue. And here are the things that I'm recommending that we work on in order for you to regain your momentum and become the best version of yourself. This, Steve, requires a lot of determination, a lot of willpower, a lot of acceptance that this is my reality now, but this is what I want to work on, creating a new perspective.
This this goes back to a man or anybody, like you said, wanting to make a change. If you don't want it to happen, it's not going to happen. You have to be at that point in your life where this is not the way I think it should be. And when I say that, you just go with what's inside. This doesn't feel right. I shouldn't, I'm with this person, doesn't support this job. Just this is not the way it's supposed to be. And then take that step to identify why you made those choices. And I don't put anything negative on somebody in making those choices. You made them for a reason. You were piloted from your past, not excuse, but it is what it is. You're a kid. Can you give examples? And it's all is confidential. We don't know, anybody you've dealt with, or it could be hypothetical. With a man dealing with something now that the situation is connected to when he was younger,
Absolutely. There are times, Steve, for example, let's look at a man who grew up in an environment where he was never good enough,
which is classic, by the way, for all of us.
right? Never good enough. His dad makes him feel like, hey, you got a 9 to 5. Where's the five? Okay. Then he grows up, he's in a relationship. He has a partner and he's working hard in that relationship, but his partner makes him feel like, hey, you're never good enough. Yes, you take me on vacations, you buy me expensive jewelry. All right, I live comfortably, but it's not enough still. You're missing the mark in this area. And so he grows up in that environment where he constantly tell himself that no matter what I do, I'm never going to match the requirements. And so sometimes he becomes a workaholic or an alcoholic or
Mm.
or a drug addict because he's constantly trying to find a space where he's like, okay, now I feel I'm good enough. I am good enough, right? So working with a man who struggles with that means helping him to find some identity, helping him to learn to celebrate his authenticity, getting into that space where he's able to detach from and I say it this way, detach now, Steve, from the script that was written for him by persons in his life who he first thought they were the experts. All right. So it's getting into that place where he learns now how to confront that and learn how to write a new script as he recognizes that in spite of what I've been embracing all my life, it's okay for me to acknowledge that they were probably not the best credible source for me to celebrate.
And it could have been any situation. It could be even hypothetically, let's say, little Michael does a painting and mom says, that came out great. We know the sky's not green. It's blue. You could do better than that. Come on. Come on. You repaint that. He thinks it's a beautiful painting.
Yeah.
and and that's just one. Now you add those all up, you know, being rejected somewhere else. Like your example where, you got a 95. Why didn't you get a 99? Whatever it might be, that adds up to the I'm not good enough. So what am I? I'm going to turn into a people pleaser. I'm going to do all these things for other people. I'm not going to take care of myself. I'm going to make myself look valuable by doing other things or offering things to people, working, like you said, a workaholic, just because I got to I got to do better. I got to do better. And what happens with somebody who's a workaholic? Then other parts of their life falls apart, the relationships, their family, all of that. And he doesn't know why he's doing it. He just thinks he's just doing it, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
running the
yeah,
script.
absolutely. And one of the things that I've discovered, Steve, is intellectual humility. Okay. And as I did my research, intellectual humility challenges us to ask this question. And I quote, what if all that I was taught is flawed? End quote. So intellectual humility puts us in that space, Steve, where we're challenged to ask ourselves this question. Because here's a big piece, Steve. Sometimes it's hard for us to acknowledge that, yes, my mom, my dad, my grandparents, my foster, my caregivers, whoever they were saying all that they said with good intent. But I can't forget this, that they don't have the final say. I do.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where the shift happens psychologically and emotionally. Yes, at a point in my life when I was vulnerable and susceptible, they spoke all these things into my existence. But now that I've grown up, I'm able to acknowledge that, hey, what if all that I was taught is flawed? Here's my opportunity to reignite, re-empower, and reconstruct my reality.
And reparent if it's from your younger years, and not taking anything away from any parents.
Mhm.
If I could do it again, I would do it differently with what I know now in terms of how you speak to your our children, how all of that, because the certain language that we use can shape their little minds, what we didn't know. And neither did our parents, and neither did their parents, and on and on and on. But I would imagine the first step is if you're going to look at all of that information back then and look at it as that was false, that is not true, you have to identify it. And that's where your help comes in, right?
Absolutely. That's a powerful space, Steve, because step one is acknowledge it. Don't deny it. Acknowledge it. Step two is seek to connect with healthy natural supports. Step three, be willing to invest the time to do the work.
Mm.
And step four, take ownership of the journey, which means you are going to have to be willing to start creating a new perspective around how you are going to live your life going forward. It's almost as if, when a rocket goes out of space, there are times when it starts shedding, eh? We have to get to that place, Steve, where we start shedding the dead weight, quote unquote, so that we can actually heal.
A great analogy, because I have the picture of the rocket and what happens. Things break away from the rocket, the boosters here and there. Well, in this situation, maybe the booster was that trauma from the schoolyard in third grade. You got to get rid of that one. Got to get rid of that one. Well, what do you got? This lean, mean rocket machine that is propelling upward, but it can't go when it's got all this stuff around it.
And Steve, one of the things that prevents us as men from healing and recovering is that we tend to become busy with doing everything else but working on ourselves. Okay? It's too much work. And what I'm saying is that if we are going to heal as men, we have got to stop making excuses and creating these false spaces or comfort zones when we know for a fact that unless I'm willing to invest and do the work on myself, then the perspective that I have of the world is not going to change. The
Mm.
perspective that I have of myself is not going to change. The way I function in my relationships is not going to change. I've got to be willing to break that cycle.
And grant yourself the approval, because so many of us, especially men, feel guilty taking
Yes.
care of myself. Wow, I got to take care of my family and everything else going on. You come last, and it can't be that way. And I believe we have to look at it in a way that you can't be you can't show up for the others in your life and everything else unless you got it nailed down and taken care of.
Absolutely, Steve. And that's why one of the first book I've ever written, Steve, I shared my own story, giving myself permission to grow. Okay. And I wrote this book just to show to the world from my own experience that I've had to learn how to give myself permission. And that's a piece that as men, we are not oftentimes open to doing. We have to give ourselves the permission to acknowledge it and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm really messing up here, man. I'm really doing a bad job at this. I need to do better. What does that mean? It means I've got to let go of my own perceptions. Because, Steve, we have to remember this. There are two things that they don't complement each other. It's ego and humility. And if we listen to ego a lot, humility is going to be far reaching. So we sometimes have to step back and ask ourselves, am I listening to ego right now? Or am I listening to humility?
Hmm. There's something to think about today. And that reminds me of something that somebody told me, and this is going back quite a number of years, but I had left a job that I was at for many years. Uh, I was there since I was a kid. Big deal. It was a big job. And it was a mutual parting. And I talked to a friend of mine who was very spiritual. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do now? I'm not, I left. And what am I going to do now? And he goes, when you're at your lowest point, you are the most humble. And that's where I took that time to search and figure things out and then just moved it on. And it was okay. But we need to give ourselves permission to just think about these things or make the change by connecting with you. Rolando, for a man, how does the whole process start?
If someone wants to connect with me, you can email me, Hyman at xyspark.org, or jump on my website, xyspark.org. Send me a message. I always try to get back in touch with any message within 24 hours, okay? Because I know, based on personal experience, Steve, that it's never easy. But once you start the first step, you will continue. You may sometimes, because I've found guys who they start, they waver, but they always come back because a flame is ignited. So this,
Mm,
I would say, start the journey, see what it looks like, and then pace yourself, challenge yourself. Remember, if you want to build muscle, it doesn't happen by going to the gym once.
it starts with going to the gym, walking through the door,
Yes.
also picking up your phone or just sending an email to you or just going to the website and just connecting. Rolando, great talking with you. Truly appreciate it. And again, I said it in the beginning. I have to say it again. I appreciate what you do in helping men move their lives forward because there's not a lot of help out there, especially that's directed specifically for men. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be here, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Yep. We'll talk soon.